So today we're going to be talking about the life cycle of a plant. Okay, before we begin, I want to review a few things. One of the things is the meaning of cycle. So a cycle is a sequence of events that repeats itself again and again. All right, and remember, lots of times I talk about a bicycle, how the wheel turns around and it keeps repeating. So that's a good visual if you put that in your mind. I just wanted to also review the 4 seasons that we talked about in our last lesson. We have spring, summer, fall, and winter. All right, and if you remember, we went over several of the effects that these seasonal changes have on plants and animals, right? So we talked about how some animals migrate, how some hibernate, and how some just make the best of what they have and they utilize their resources so that they can survive in the weather. And so that might mean that they are making adaptations or changes to their behavior or even their bodies. For example, when we talked about a bear hibernating, they would eat a lot of food and use that stored fat to survive through the winter. Okay. Previous lessons we were talking about the seasons and how plants and animals change with the seasons. So those changes that we see, they happen again and again, right? So those are cycles that we see. So today we're just going to be focusing on the life cycle of a plant. Okay? So I will begin reading from our text now. All living things pass through stages from birth to adult called a life cycle. For many living things, the cycle of life follows the 4 seasons of the year. For some living things, the cycle of life is short and is completed in just days, months, or a single year. For other living things, the cycle of life continues for many, many years. So these are pictures of some beautiful flowering plants, okay? And usually when we refer to flowers, we talk about the petals, right? We say, oh, what a beautiful flower. But really we're talking about the whole flower, right? The stem, the leaves, the petals, and everything in between. Today, you will learn about the life cycle of a flowering plant. Just think about all the flowering plants you see in the parks, yards, gardens, fields, and meadows. Our world is awash with colorful, vibrant flowering plants. How do these plants grow and reproduce, or make seeds for new plants? Let's find out. So let's pause for a second. What does reproduce mean? Remember, it just said make seeds for new plants. Okay. Germination. A flowering plant begins its life cycle as a seed. Seeds need special conditions to germinate or begin to grow. So germinate means to grow. Spring provides seeds with the right conditions to grow. Therefore, the life cycle of a flowering plant begins in spring. In spring, there is more sunlight and temperatures are warmer. Seeds need just the right amount of light from the sun, nutrients from the soil, and water in order to grow. Once the seed germinates or sprouts, it grows and develops into a young plant with roots, a stem, and leaves. The first leaves unfold to allow photosynthesis to begin. Right? Remember we talked about that big word last time, photosynthesis? Photosynthesis is the process by which plants make their own food as well as oxygen. And if you guys remember, we as humans use the oxygen to breathe, right? We need it to live. So plants are important to us. They help us breathe, okay? Without plants, we would not be able to live. Plants use sunlight and water to make food in the form of glucose, a type of sugar. is a picture of the interior of a flower. In the warmth of spring and summer, plants continue to grow. The young plant is called a seedling. Gradually, a plant's stem will grow taller and true leaves will emerge. Once the plant matures or becomes an adult plant, flowers appear. All right, so emerge, that means what? They just said once the plant matures, the flowers will appear. So emerge means they're coming out. They are able to be seen now. They're visible. In order for a flowering plant to reproduce or produce seeds that will make new flowering plants, it must be pollinated. Pollination is when pollen from one flower mixes with the pollen of another flower so that the plant can make seeds. But how is pollen transferred from one place to another? In other words, how does pollination occur? Flowering plants need pollinators to help them with pollination. Pollinators are insects, birds, and other animals that are attracted to the shape, fragrance, or color of a flower. Without pollinators, most flowering plants would not produce seeds. Insect pollinators. Insect pollinators. There are many types of pollinators, such as birds and small mammals, but insects are the number one pollinators of flowering plants. The flowers of a flowering plant are designed to attract various pollinators, especially insects. The shape, fragrance, and color of the flower, as well as the sweet-tasting nectar contained within the flower itself, attract many different kinds of insects. As insects move from flower to flower, the sticky substance, called pollen, clings to their bodies and is transferred not only within a flower, but from flower to flower. So when we talk about something being transferred, it means it's moved. So if this bee in this picture is on that purple or pink flower, okay, it's picking up the pollen, so the pollen is moving or being transferred onto that insect's body. So when that insect flies over to another flower, like the orange flower in the bottom right, they're actually taking the pollen from that purple and transferring it or bringing it over to that other flower. Honeybees are the most common pollinators. They carry out more pollination than any other insect. Some scientists think that bees are attracted to bright blue and violet-colored flowers, whereas butterflies like fragrant yellow, red, pink, and orange flowers. Butterflies also like wide petals, so they can settle on them while they drink the sweet nectar. Mammal and bird pollinators. Birds are important pollinators too, especially of wildflowers. For example, hummingbirds have perfectly designed beaks that can reach the nectar inside long, tubular-shaped flowers. There are more than 2,000 different kinds of birds in the world that feed on nectar. Birds have a poor sense of smell and help to pollinate unscented flowering plants because they are attracted by the color and shape of the flowers. A variety of small mammals pollinate flowering plants. Mice, shrews, and rats, even tree-dwelling animals such as lemurs and small monkeys, can help transfer pollen. People also help the pollination process. Often, when people are working in their flower gardens, the sticky pollen is accidentally carried from flower to flower. For some plants, pollination does not just occur during the daytime. Some scented flowers attract nighttime pollinators such as bats and moths. Although 90% of flowering plants are pollinated by animals, especially insects, the wind and even water can play a part too. Pollen is carried by the wind. Flowering plants that live in water, such as lilies, can be pollinated as the water carries the pollen from one plant to another. Once pollen has been transferred and reaches the new plant, the flower produces seeds. The next part of the process is called seed dispersal. This is the process of carrying the seeds away from the parent plant so that the flowering plant life cycle can begin all over again. And for some of my friends who have allergies, that might be why you have allergies at certain times of the year more than others when the wind is picking up and the pollen's in the air. Dispersal. Just like pollination, there are various ways that seeds can be dispersed or spread apart in different directions. Many flowering seeds are carried away from the parent plant by the wind. As the wind blows, the seeds are carried up into the air. Some flowering plants have pods or capsules that explode, sending forth a burst of tiny seeds into the air. Okay, and you can see that really well with the dandelion right here. Lots of times you might blow on a dandelion and make a wish, right? And when you blow, all those little white fuzzy things, those are actually seeds, right? And so they're being dispersed or sent away and in different directions, right? And because you've sent those seeds somewhere else, they can actually start another new plant somewhere else. Okay? Sometimes animals carry seeds from place to place without knowing it. Some seeds, contained within a protective casing, can attach themselves to the fur of passing animals. The protective casing will eventually fall off the animal and rest in the soil, ready to begin the life cycle process. Some seeds are contained within a fruit that animals like to eat. Animals either spit the seeds out or they eat them, and the seeds reach the earth in the animal droppings that are left behind. Once on the ground, they rest in the soil until the germination process can begin again the following spring, called seed to seed. All of this is happening around us in spring, summer, and early autumn. The potential for new life is being created as flowering plants are pollinated and seeds are dispersed. Across the world, the life cycle of flowering plants is renewed or happens again and again each year.